Let's begin to listen to one another again. Hear one another. See one another. Show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured.
In just a few moments, President Biden will sign off on his day one agenda, signing a raft of executive orders, some of which will mark a full 180-degree reversal of Trump policies, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization, and ending Donald Trump's travel ban from several Muslim-majority nations. We want to bring into our conversation former Democratic Congresswoman from Maryland and an MSNBC political analyst, Donna Edwards, and Jason Johnson, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University and a contributor to the GRIO as well as MSNBC. Donna, your thoughts now that the inaugural address has had a few hours to sort of marinate in all of our minds and hearts?
Well, that, and I mean, you know, what you just played, one of the things that I heard from Joe Biden is he was saying to the opposition, hear me out, take the measure of me. And I felt like that was what today was about. He was calling for unity, but he recognized the difficulty of that. I remember him, you know, saying that it isn't just about our words. And I think that, you know, today, I think all of us are called to democracy, not as observers, but as participants, as a participatory sport, if you will. And Joe Biden is saying, I'm going to do my part. And he was imploring all of us to do our part as well. And then, of course, seeing Kamala Harris both being sworn in and then sitting as the president of the Senate, I think I've been smiling all day long, and my face is starting to hurt. And because it's such a glorious moment. And I think as, you know, for Black women, for Black girls, to know that this woman is presiding over, you know, basically a body of a whole bunch of white guys adding a little color in today and a little youth in today. And it was wonderful to see. And, you know, them walking down the street and, you know, couples who actually like each other, holding hands, embracing at the, you know, at the portico steps. It was just all really very special. And I love that the sun continues to shine on the White House, because that's the way I feel today.
Jason Johnson, let me read you some of the speech that I think evokes some of those emotions that Don Edwards is talking about. President Biden says this in his inaugural address, quote, "We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in each other's shoes, in other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes, because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you."
Provide that on the ground.
You know, Nicole, I was moved by Joe Biden's speech because it was coherent and it wasn't violent and it wasn't vulgar. And after 4 years, after 4 terrible years of what we went through with Donald Trump, it was nice to actually just hear someone be reasonable and sound. But I have to say that, you know, ultimately, I've never been overly convinced by Joe Biden's calls for unity, because I don't think you can really have unity with the current version of the Republican Party. I don't think you can have unity with a legislature there's hundreds of people who wanted to invalidate your ability to become president of the United States. So I know he has to give that kind of speech. I know that's the kind of world that he wants to go into, but it's not the kind of world that we have. And I found a good chaser to his speech, Amanda Gorman's poem, where she talks about, hey, look, there's a lot of dark things that we had to overcome. That one resonated with me as much, if not more, than Joe Biden, because I think she seemed to be slightly more aware of how dark and dire things were. But, you know, we'll see. Joe Biden is a decent and an optimistic man.
Let me press on this a little bit, because this is a conversation you and I've had before, Jason. I thought that perhaps another audience, and I'm obviously a student of counter-extremism and how you engage with a part of society that has, one, become disinformed, misinformed intentionally, and two, a faction of which has become violent. I mean, the insurrection last Wednesday was disinformation turned into violence against the state, against the federal government, against the Capitol, against Donald Trump's own vice president. And I wondered if some of what President Biden was trying to do was to peel away those who can be peeled away from being radicalized.
If he's doing that, I think he's wasting his time. I mean, I do. And I mean, it's the same thing, Nicole, it's the same thing as sort of doing campaign work, right? Like, you may get infrequent voters, you may get regular voters, but like the person who says all politics are trash, look, if you want to spend all day canvassing to try and convince that one person to come out and vote, it's not the best expenditure of your time. I don't think the Democrats benefit by spending time trying to speak to the people who would want to be in favor of the insurrection. I don't think they benefit talking to the people who want to cover for the people engaging in insurrection. I don't think Democrats benefit from coddling members who supported the insurrection within Congress. You have to move forward. And you know, President Biden said this. He's like, look, enough of us, right, are committed to these ideas. You have to work with the people who are willing to work with you. You have to work with the people who are willing to be committed to America. And those, when they had the final vote, and you still had 100 or so Republicans in the House and in the Senate still vote in favor of invalidating his election. That was the line in the sand, Nicole. That was the line. Those people can't be negotiated with. And I think that the new president, if he thinks he can peel those people off, he's being naive. He's got to focus on those who are committed to actual governance. And that's not people like Mitch McConnell, who's going to pretend he wants governance while at the same time fomenting the kind of discontent that we saw in the House and Senate just 2 weeks ago.
Senator, it's going to take me a minute. Vice President Harris, obviously just on the floor of the United States Senate, swearing in 3 new senators, Democratic senators. And I wonder, Jason, if you think that losing a bunch of elections might bring if not an ideological move towards something less extreme and less violent than where some of the Trump base turned 2 Wednesdays ago, if losing elections might have that effect.
I think the only election that would change some of the rank and file Republicans, it would be like, you know, years ago when Tom Daschle got beat, like that sent a shockwave through Democrats, like, whoa, hey, that's the Senate leader, et cetera, et cetera. Something would have to happen electorally to Mitch McConnell or Ted Cruz. As long as the leaders of the party appear to be stable and safe in their electoral positions, you're going to have Josh Hawley's, you're going to have Tom Cotton's, you're going to have other people who are going to follow that model because the Republicans don't feel that they've faced real electoral consequences yet, even though they lost the Senate. Right? You got to remember, we've watched it for 4 years, Nicole, and we watched it for longer, even when it was with Barack Obama. A lot of the Republicans in the House and Senate, they actually don't care about governing. They're more interested in being the opposition. When they control everything, they can't even get attacked. They couldn't even get health care redone. So I don't think that losing elections makes them angry or makes them upset or would change their tone. It'll allow them to be basically obstructionists to the extreme and not have to face any real consequences.